Hello, welcome to our new astrological podcast. Today I want to talk about Leo rising. So, generally, what I will be doing, I will be discussing the psychic signature of the zodiac sign Leo as it applies to a rising sign. Now, like I told you, the rising sign, for instance, is very different from the sun sign. And I've been through this in my other podcasts. When you have Leo as a rising sign, it expresses quite differently from when you have Leo as a sun sign and when you have Leo as a moon sign. Now, these are the three principal natal chart points that basically color the entire chart: your ascendant, your sun, and your moon sign. Now, but for me, from my perspective, I've always insisted that the astrological ascendant or rising point is the most important point in the natal chart. And the reason is very simple. It is what marks you uniquely. As a sun sign, you would share the same sun sign with a whole lot of people over a 30-day period. And as a moon sign, you would share the same moon sign with a whole lot of people over the 2-day period that the moon is in that sign. But your astrological zodiac sign, natal sign, your astrological ascendant point marks you out very precisely because it changes every 2 hours. Now, it doesn't, you would still share a whole lot of similarities with everyone born under maybe everyone born within 2 hours of your birth. But there are further intangibles that are interpreted within the chart in terms of the degree of the rising sign, because all the degrees have, remember, these are angles we're talking about. And even on the sun, as a sun sign or as a moon sign, the degrees are quite important because you have various interpretations associated with various degrees. And remember, signs are not just, these are psychic energies, and even though the circle is divided into 12 equal parts, these are just for learning purposes. Why? Because psychic energies do not stop and start abruptly. They mutate, they transform from one, like I've given in many podcasts. Aries is what becomes the psychic energy of Aries is what becomes the psychic energy of Taurus and Gemini, and then Cancer, all the way to Pisces. So it is not there. It is not a hard cutoff between signs. They morph into one another through a gradual process of transformation, which is exemplified by the gradual movement of the heavens, you know. And this is a very important. This is a very important thing in the basic understanding of astrology. Now, like I always say in all my astrological podcasts, astrology is a language. In and of itself, it has no meaning and no power. It is a symbolic language, all right, that is written on a very basic premise, and that is, as above, so below. What it's essentially saying is that there are no boundaries between the internal and the external. It is the external, right, that synchronizes with the internal, and the internal synchronizes with the external. And I've given a lot of podcasts which can be interpreted as a scientific or procedural explanations for why astrology works. Most people think astrology is just magic and all that. No. A human body, in fact, the very essence of life is built around processes that cycle. That's really what they are. Life is the sustenance of cyclical processes that are being represented in carbon. So carbon essentially mimics cyclical processes from its environment in a type of mirror image. So if you want to understand what drove the formation of life on Earth, it is the environmental, it is Earth's early environment, the dynamism contained within Earth's early environment. That is what drove the evolution of life on Earth, because what is life except the continuation of those geological and environmental processes as represented by carbon? It's like you learn to dance pretty well, and then after a while, little kids watching you, they learn to mimic your dance steps, and they begin to dance in tune with you. This is exactly what you're looking at. And that's why the heavens are able to explain biological reality as applied to a human consciousness. And the reason why this would apply to a human consciousness has to do with the processes that take place within the cortex, the neocortex in your brain, and how that is wired with your thalamus. Now, I have a lot of podcasts explaining this, because my understanding of astrology does not just center on, interpretations that are derived from. No, I actually go to first principles, meaning I go right to the derivation of life, how life originated on Earth, and how astrological principles basically are just a perspective on the origination of life, and why these astrological principles actually work within human nature. It has to do with the derivation of meaning, pattern formation that's taking place deep within our consciousness. This is in tandem with the cyclical circulatory processes that are taking place within our bodies, because they are in tandem with this cyclical processes of these orbs that are revolving. I mean, some of these orbs, the size of Jupiter, for instance, is 1,000 times the size of Earth, revolving around us. And the solar wind from the sun, I once gave an explanation. I said the sun is a massive nuclear reaction. Yeah, but that's just physics, isn't it? What the sun is the sun is basically pouring out radiation of all sorts, and all these life on Earth has formed with all of these dynamisms encapsulated within the movements or the structures that carbon is able to form, because carbon is able to form cross-linked chains with itself. And that gives it the backbone for the flexibility that is responsible for the formation of life. And I once told, I linked all of these explanations to my principles of organized complexity, the 5 principles of organized complexity, which is an ebook which I wrote. And in these podcasts that I've made, I always reiterate that the number 6 is the symbol for organized complexity. As in, if you're going to represent organized complexity as a singular unit, then it will be the number 6. And I've given reasons for all of this. And I've postulated that in every complex natural system that is fundamental, you will find the 6 there, being responsible, because that's how nature, the universe, God, however you want to call it, this is how he creates, this is how he builds. Okay? And that's why you find these 6 layers within your cortex. You find the 6 layers within the lateral geniculate nucleus that is responsible for your vision. And all over, you find it all over in the standard model of particle physics. You find all of this. Okay, but this is not that kind of podcast. I just wanted to go there because astrology is not something that just, derived by primitive people from a primitive time and all that. That's what everyone, most people would like you to believe, especially those that are in the hard sciences. But we know better. Okay, we understand exactly where it is coming from. We understand the necessity. It is essentially a symbolic representation of extremely complex processes. So it represents an essential aspect of the principles of organized complexity, which is the simplification of extremely complex processes. Okay, so these energies, for instance, the energy of Venus, the psychic energy of Venus, the psychic energy of the sun, we can condense them into these names. These are relatively recent names. Venus, for instance, is it Greek or something? So, but these energies have had names since antiquity, most of which we will never know. But it doesn't matter what you call it. What we're interested in is the functional form, how it applies to meaning making, pattern formation within the human being's consciousness. Okay, so in this particular podcast, I'm going to be talking about Leo rising. Now, the essence of Leo is the sun. Leo is the lion, and that's because obviously the constellation of Leo forms this pattern that has been associated with the behavior or the characteristics of a lion. Now, when people make connections between dots of light in the sky and something that exists within the immediate environment, like a lion, for instance. These constellations are not actually, I mean, the stars that make up the constellation of Leo are not in the same place. Some of the stars are separated by vast distances. Their three-dimensional structure is not something that you would that would be immediately apparent to you if you change the spatial orientation of the Earth. If you move the Earth a couple of light years away, then the orientation, as it seems from the perspective of the Earth, immediately changes. Now, that brings us to a very important point. The pattern formation that is used to form the constellations is directly related to our vantage point on Earth. Because the self-consciousness we're trying to understand is the self-consciousness that evolved and developed on Earth. That's really what it is. Now, the symbol for Leo is represented as a lion. It's symbolized by the behavior of the sun. And the sun, the glyph of the sun astrologically is a circle with a point in the middle, with a dot in the middle, signifying the formation of self-consciousness, which is an active construct. Okay, self-consciousness is not a thing in itself. It is a must. It's like moving your arm. When you need to move your arm, you send signals from your brain to the muscles in that arm to perform a particular synchronized or a sequential motion. It's the same thing with self-consciousness. When you wake up in the morning from sleep, you pull your self-consciousness together based on the memories that you have been able to associate with your sense of self. And that fires up your sense of self when you wake up in the morning. When you go to sleep at night or any other time, that's active process dissolves into a passive form, and then you use like resting a muscle. Do you understand? And you dissolve. Essentially, the sense of self dissolves. It's still there, but it's in a passive form. It is scattered. And then the process of rousing is the process of reconfiguring or reconstituting that sense of self. And that's really what it is. So as a sun sign, Leo, the sun is an active construct, which is the formation of self-awareness. So if your sun is in Leo, then it means that when you try to bring your attention to a point, you do it in the form of the Leonine form, meaning most likely the things you're going to perceive as part of your self-awareness are the things that give you a sense of self, a sense of beingness that is significant. Okay, and these are the things that your sun sign would latch onto when it tries to construct a sense of self. If your moon sign is in Leo, then that implies that when you seek security, emotional security in any way, shape, or form, the things that you will be attracted to as secure forms for yourself are things that give yourself significance, meaning an inner meaning that you actually belong to something, that you're actually somebody. Okay, and that requires a type of separation or differentiation of some kind. So that is the dramatic aspect of Leo, wanting to separate itself and stand out in a sense. So you would seek your emotional sense of self from things that make you stand out. Okay, that make you feel special. But when Leo is rising on the eastern horizon at the moment of your birth, then your entire life is dramatic. Your entire life has this, it's an actor is born or an actress is born. Pause, action, scene. That's really what it is for the whole of your life. You see? Because you are one who is born to be seen. And even though you may not end up being an actress or an actor, that regality of being seen or wanting to be acknowledged colors the whole of the evolution of your life from the moment of birth up until the end. Okay? And this is the essence of Leo, because the essence of Leo is the seeking of self-significance. Because Leo represents the self-developed ego, complete in itself. It is the beginning of the second stage of development, because I once explained that the entire 12 sections of the natal chart can be divided into three quadrants. Not quadrants, but three quadrants. You have Aries to Cancer, representing the first developmental cycle that is now impugned within Leo as the second cycle that ends in Scorpio. And then the third cycle begins in Sagittarius all the way to Pisces. Now, it always follows that because fire is the beginning of this the development of self. Okay, and you can even go as far as saying that Aries to Cancer represents the id or the ID, as Freud called it, or is it Jung now? I don't know. And then Leo to Scorpio represents the development of the ego. And then Sagittarius to Pisces represents the development of the superego. In fact, it's a good analogy because, as we'll see later, I'll get to that later. But as usual, I'm going to read from my ebook, which is the astrological musings beside a fireplace. Like I said before, there are 3 parts to these. There's going to be more. But these articles are articles I wrote for different groups I've lectured in the past. And the idea behind these articles is to try to get to first base, to try to get to first principles about the origin of these psychic impulses and why we have those psychic impulses in the first place. What are they used for? Now, most people would read off a list and say, okay, Leo has these qualities, but why? Why does Leo need to have these qualities? Is it because it's a lion? But the individual is not a lion. The association with lioness or the association with the animal is because the developers of this language are trying to point something within the psyche. They're trying to highlight a particular set of traits or attributes, or behavior, which they liken to the behavior of a lion. I often tell people that, please, people look at Leo and say, oh, it's charming, bubbly, what. A lion is a ferocious beast. It is so ferocious that the only thing that hunts and kills a lion is another lion. So lions are not furry little cats, or they're not tabbies or anything. They are actually, everything in the jungle or in the wild, everything in the savannah is afraid of a lion. Okay, a lion is usually not afraid of anything. He's only worried about other lions. So lions are extremely territorial creatures, very territorial. In fact, all it takes for another lion to kill another lion is just to stray into its territory. That's all. Okay, so there is an element to this Leonine character that is often not talked about. One that is extremely ferocious and beastly. Even though its regal parts are often accentuated, but the regality of a lion comes from the fact that it can destroy any other animal that threatens it. Now, we're going to relate this to the archetype, the psychological archetype within a human being. So here we go. Now, the title of the article is On the Metamorphosis of Self-Doubt into Self-Significance, Leo Rising. And that's interesting because what I'm trying to say is that self-doubt is what becomes self-significance in the evolutionary development of the Leonine character. It's interesting because most people would not associate doubt with Leo. But here we go. So I'm just going to read off and then I will interject with the occasional commentary to try to further clarify whatever it is I'm trying to say. So here we go. Here's a little thought experiment that I used to perform when I was little. I would look around me and try to identify everything I could see, smell, touch, taste, and hear. I would play this game for as long as I could concentrate. Eventually, I would get tired of it. Didn't think much of this game until I got a bit older, and the implication of what I was doing dawned on me. I was teaching myself to be aware of my surroundings. Yes, but something else was happening. I realized that despite all that I could make myself aware of, there were as many relatively independent viewpoints as there were people. No matter how realistic my viewpoint was, no matter how concrete it felt, there was also someone else, maybe halfway around the world, who could feel the exact same way. Such concreteness of feeling helps engender what we have since considered to be the axis of our individuality. Individuality feeling as if the entire world revolved around us. But how real and concrete could my individual experience be if someone somewhere could also feel as strong an individuality such as I felt, and also feel as if the whole world revolved around them? Something so common could not be concretely real, or could it? The longer these thoughts went on, the longer it confused me. As I got much older and researched more, I realized why this was happening. If these feelings resonate strongly within you, and if for some reason you have always felt yourself strongly, then chances are that Leo was rising on the eastern horizon at the exact time of your birth. Having spoken of what the significance of the ascendant is in my article on Scorpio ascendant, I will refrain from doing so now. Suffice to say that at birth, it is the only active point of awareness. All other placements in the natal chart exist as mere potential. This makes the ascendant unique in its context-like nature for every other placement in the natal chart. Everything must be seen within the context of the ascendant. The constellation Leo lies between Cancer and Virgo on the plane of the ecliptic. It is the 12th largest constellation in the northern sky. The brightest star in Leo is called Regulus or Alpha Leonis. Regulus is a well-known star and is the 21st brightest star in the night sky. Its name translates to Little King. Regulus is a star system composed of 4 members. Regulus A is a spectroscopic binary as its partner has not been seen directly yet and is thought to be very small. Regulus A itself is only 3.8 times more massive than our Sun and is thought to be only a few million years old. Mythologically, Leo is thought to be an extremely old constellation. It is believed that a similar constellation was known in Mesopotamia some 6,000 years ago. The Persians called it Shir. The Babylonians called it Ugula. The Greeks referred to it as the Neman lion, which was killed by Heracles in one of his 12 tasks. Astrologically, Leo is referred to as a royal sign, and its rulership ascribed to the sun itself. The reason Leo is described this way is because of the primary impulse which it connotes. Leo is the developed and self-sufficient ego, complete in its own self-expression. It is the ego developed as much as it can possibly be in relation to itself alone. Its context and reference is itself. It is this specific awareness that all Leo ascendants and those with personal planets in Leo search for their whole lives. That is, the desire to just be who they are, without reference to anything else. Because Leo is such a complete and self-sufficient sign, it does not come equipped with any understanding of how to enter social relationships. When faced with this possibility, it immediately surmises that such relationships must reference Leo itself to be meaningful. As such, the only validation Leo needs in any social relationship is acknowledgement of its unique individuality. This acknowledgement can take many forms, but the only requirement is that Leo be acknowledged as a unique individual. Usually, in healthy relationship formation, this is the most basic of premises, as only individuals enter relationships with one another. However, because Leo doesn't hide this need for acknowledgement, most others in relationship to Leo withhold this acknowledgement from Leo to the point where Leo increasingly goes looking for this. Why? For the simple reason that people in general like to be acknowledged also and see Leo's need as childlike and possibly egotistical. Commentary. Now, basically, I've just described the essential impulse behind the Leonine character, which is the need for self-validation. People often see Leo as kind of egotistical in terms of bragging, looking for validation from other people because they want to become the center of attention. Yes, this is true, but the truth is this is a projection. What Leo really needs is to get in touch with its own self-significance. It is a self-developed ego, complete in itself. It doesn't need anybody else because it doesn't understand the existence of anything else. It is before Libra. Now, all the signs before Libra don't understand the relationship to another. They cannot see the self as an extension. They cannot see the self as it extends to others. This transformation between self and other happens in Virgo in the 6th house. Okay, it is the 6th house that prepares Leo, the ego as it is developed within Leo. It is the 6th house or Virgo that prepares the ego for entering into a relationship with another in Libra. Without the 6th house, Leo couldn't get into a relationship because it would come with its childlike need for self-significance, which others would now interpret as egotistical. But far from it, Leo doesn't have an egotistical bone in its body. It just wants to be acknowledged. It's a simple child, literally. It's a kitten, even though it's a full-grown lion. This basic need, once it goes unfulfilled, the individual begins to replay cycles of behavior, seeking this simple acknowledgement. And once this acknowledgement is received in a genuine format, then the Leo is transformed. He's transformed into a being of absolute generosity. And that is the king archetype. So you can see the requirement of, and that's why Leo is considered the self-developed ego, complete in itself, because its requirement is so simple, it is so basic, that it can be satisfied by a single set of words. I don't know if you understand what the implications of what I'm saying. Other signs need things. Leo doesn't need anything really from anyone. It doesn't even know that anyone exists per se. It is very comfortable in itself as long as it is aware of itself on a level that satisfies it in terms of its significance in the world. It wants to derive meaning because the sun, for instance, and that is why the sun is associated with the sign of Leo. The sun is our focal point for awareness, and it is that focal point that allows us to construct a sense of I. Okay? These are tied to memories that form in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, or the first house, the second house, the third house, and the fourth house, because it is all of that synthesized that becomes the developed ego in Leo. So if there's been a break in any of these processes, then the ego is damaged. And when the ego is damaged, Leo becomes, a simple requirement becomes a forceful need. So the need to brag, the need to be showy, the need to aggrandize, self-aggrandize. You see? These things are now put out there as needs because now the ego is unbalanced. It is in trouble. What it is looking for is looking for self-significance, but in an aggressive way. Because there has been an impairment in the development of that ego. Otherwise, a self-balanced ego, a well-developed self-balanced ego is an extremely, is a simple creature. Now, when I mean simple creature, you must still understand that this is the representation of a lion. So there is a ferociousness and a beastliness to all of that. And that plays out when Leo starts to feel threatened. So, moving on. However, nothing could be further from the truth, and most Leos know this. Unbeknown to most Leos, their need is a noble one, no matter what anybody says or thinks. The Leonine overriding aim is the freedom to connect with their souls, their center of being, and to connect so simply that they recognize the freedom to express themselves completely and honestly. As such, Leos want to create in their own image, with a desire to catch a glimpse of the creator, him, herself, who is ultimately doing the creating. Leo is driven pitilessly by the need to connect with this inner self, such that every other thing takes a backstage. This is the only relevant mission for a Leo ascendant. In a sense, it is the only mission for the simple reason that the moment a Leo makes the breakthrough in awareness necessary to connect itself with itself, it unlocks Leo's power, charm, honesty, youth, playfulness, and most importantly, creative majesty. A well-balanced connection resolves into loftiness, high ideals, prestige, courage, integrity, self-sufficiency, and very importantly, creativity. Leo is the sign of the soul who has connected with its own significance. Its awareness is a recognition of self as author, creator, controller, decision maker, destroyer, lover, enemy, father, mother, sister, brother, etc. As such, Leo involves some role play. But the important difference is that Leo understands that it is playing a role on a stage that it created, a stage it controls, and a stage where it is the primary storyteller, actor, and director. Leo is equipped to deal with this reality, and a well-balanced Leo will handle all aspects majestically. This does not mean that Leo encounters no challenges. It does, and its challenges can be very devastating because they affect Leo's sense of self. The danger with Leo is that it can lose its soul, and a Leo with a lost soul is a very depressed, egotistical, brash, and unhappy Leo. Commentary. Now this is really, really, really very important. Leo is the only sign that can suffer this. The losing of soul. What most people don't realize is that the word soul comes from the word sol, which is a Latin name for the word sun. And your soul is how you make meaning. Most people don't realize this. And because it ties back to the nature of the sun sign. The sun sign is how you make meaning. The meaning making that you have, the capability for meaning making that you have, is dependent on how you pull your sense of I together. Because the way you make meaning in your life and how you interpret everything else depends on how you pull your sense of self together. That's why when you start feeling very bad, when your sense of self starts becoming very impaired, then things begin to go wrong. Your perception of the world begins to change. You see? It's not coincidence. It's because the sun is the organizing principle for the entire solar system. And so the sun in this natal chart is also acting in that capacity. It is organizing and orchestrating the spatio-temporal arrangement of all the events in your life. And this is the essence of Leo. This is the directive, the creative aspect of Leo. Leo is playing on a stage that it created. It is telling itself stories in its head about the role it is playing. It is the only act. It is the actor or actress. It is the director. It is the stage. It is its own audience. That's really what it is. So, reality is a projective. Is the projection of psychic energy. Because that's what the brain does. The brain is a projective enterprise. That's exactly what it is. And that's why all the impulses, as they are, the linkage between the neuronal patterns within the brain, coming from the thalamus, are projecting into a 6-layered cortical structure in what are called neocortical columns. There is, in my ebook, I make a reference between these wirings and the distribution, the organization encoded within the distribution of prime numbers, which now features the essence, which now goes on to explain why all the human beings, even most mammals, have the 6-layered cortical structure. The reason for that is so that you can make meaning, and it is driven by this organizing principle. So the solar principle essentially is the one orchestrating and arranging the neuronal patterns in your head. That's why astrology, one of the reasons why astrology works, is not, it's not magic. Literally, that's really what it is. Now, this is not something you're going to find anywhere else. This is something you can only get here, because this is original research. Mm-hmm. So the key to the Leonine, to unlocking the Leonine character, what people perceive as integrity, because the solar attribute of a Leonine character comes from that nature of that marriage between the solar impulse and the lion. What is the marriage? The marriage is the lion having conquered its environment and being able to dominate it in its entirety is analogically equivalent to the way the sun dominates all life on earth. Not in a crushing kind of way. It could crush you if you don't respect it, but in a way that signifies higher order meaning. When you look at the sun, you see that the sun, all the cyclical processes on earth that have to do with water, the sun essentially heats up water, and this begins to drive all the cyclical processes on earth, which ultimately result in the formation of life. As a top predator in the savannah, the lion essentially orchestrates the entirety of the ecosystem, in a sense, organizing it. So these are analogical, metaphorical similarities, and there's a reason why these similarities work, because they represent something deep taking place within within that aspect of human psychology. Because remember, we formed under a single sun. In one of my podcasts, I try to explain how unique this is, because most stars are binary systems. Human consciousness developed under a single sun. It's amazing. It means that we don't have to go through the process of trying to understand the perception of unity or oneness. It's already given to us. You see? This is amazing. Most people don't understand how amazing this is, because the unity of perception, that is what self-awareness is trying to come to terms with, to grasp fully. That reality is not fragmentary. Reality is not broken into pieces. There is only one sense of self, only one sense of, there is only one sun, there is only one God. So these are deeply important principles that you begin to come to terms with in the sign of Leo. Okay, moving on. A Leo ascendant loses his or her soul when he or she works against the very essence of their significance. The significance of a Leo ascendant can be deciphered from the placement, position, and aspects to their sun within their natal chart. These will highlight challenges and allied resources available to Leo on their path to self discovery and self significance. Every Leonine character has a date with destiny, a date when they must challenge for the significance of their soul. What the context behind such a challenge is can be deciphered through in depth study of the natal chart. As a fixed and very powerful sign, Leo is fierce when challenged. It is advisable and wise never to challenge a Leo in direct confrontation. There can only be one winner. However fierce the lion might be, he or she fights honestly because it is important to him or her, that an adversary be defeated into submission in the eyes of his own moral authority or her own moral authority. Very few Leos would resort to underhanded tactics to defeat an adversary. This is the Leonine's weakness, and it comes from the very same place where he gets his strength and courage. Leos are not very strategic. It is almost as if they are blindsided by the dazzle of their own significance. What the lion lacks in strategy, they more than make up for in courage and brute fierceness. Any attempts to undermine the lion must succeed at first attempt, otherwise the lion is a terrible foe to behold. His or her battles are fought with honor, but also with total savagery once the rules of the game have been established. Commentary. Now, this goes back to what I said about the imagery of the lion as a significator for the sign of Leo. Okay? The lion is a terrible beast. It's a ferocious beast, and if you've been fortunate enough to see the attack of a lion, or while it's hunting, or when two lions are going at it, or having at it, then you're witnessing something spectacular. These are not animals that can be trifled with. And the same thing happens with the personality. A leonine personality has so much integrity, so much honesty, that when a leonine personality is not displaying these two characteristics, then something has truly impaired the ego. The ego no longer feels its self-significance, and it's not been able to lift itself up. So it doesn't have that radiating quality. What the leonine character radiates is integrity. That's where the courage comes from, because the lion will look at you and tell you exactly what it is. They have no time to play your games, and it is in that sense that the lion is not strategic, because there is deception in the world. You see? So a lion can be blindsided by their own sense of integrity, because the world, how many people make use of whatever strategies are available to them to try to gain the upper hand. Yeah, like I was saying, Leo it is wise never to confront a Leo head on, because despite the fact that a Leo will play according to the rules and will seek to do, because what it really needs to do is to defeat its enemy in a way that it can be applauded. Regality is something that must remain with the Leonine character. So it wants to understand what the rules are, so it can play by those rules and defeat its enemy fair and square, and then take maximum accolades for that feat. Now, because of this, the Leonine character, for all its strength and courage, is susceptible to flattery. So what it needs is really simple, but simplicity can also undermine its strength, because, like I said, people don't play fair, and when a Leonine character understands that people don't play fair, then it can expand its rule book. You see, because integrity, according to the Leo, is playing by the rules. Now, it can also play dirty as long as that is part of the acceptable rules of the game. So the developed Leo expands its rule book to understand that, look, the nature of integrity is, you know, just means playing by the rules, and the nature of the rules means that it needs to encapsulate all the possible conflictual dynamics, and then Leo can become very formidable. Otherwise, when it excludes some of the possibilities of how conflicts play out, it may become undermined by its own definition of integrity. So that's really what it is. But you don't want to get into a battle with a Leonine personality that is already, um, you know. So that's really what it is. So moving on, the secret to Leo's outgoing posture in the world is this: every disposition which the Leonine expects in the world must first be given to the self in order to manifest physically. Leo seeks acknowledgement in the world, so he must first accept his own significance at a soul level. The same goes with wealth, grace, splendor, honor, etc. A Leo who has not acknowledged themselves honestly at soul level lacks significance in the physical world. That is, a Leo who has not acknowledged themselves honestly at soul level lacks this significance in the physical world, and as such seeks to construct this significance forcefully. Grace gives way to bullying, self pride gives rise to arrogant behavior, integrity becomes dishonesty, while creativity tends to destruction. This is a Leo that feels a compelling need to continually remind everyone of its self worth. This is a desperate and poor Leo searching for connection with itself. Every Leo ascendant must figure out its place in the world and then must seek significance in that place, but by first acknowledging this significance to itself, by itself, and for itself at a soul level. Only then can all the wonderful qualities of Leo pour forth from it. These qualities inevitably illuminate the kingdom which Leo must preside over, well until the next challenger comes up. Make no mistake about it. Strength invites challenge, and a balanced Leo exudes strength and confidence. Just as the light from the sun gives the other planets significance, Leo illuminates the entire psyche and brings order to it. Its house placement indicates where focus is needed, where we need to create, and where we must act with a sense of significance. The sun's position indicates where the potential exists for dignity, recognition, acknowledgement, honors, rewards of self-fulfillment, and clarity of thought. As such, Mercury's position within the natal chart must always be understood in tandem with the position of the sun. As emissary of the sun and the closest planet to it, Mercury is the means by which the sun communicates with its own psyche and with the world around it. It is what enables the sun to administer a solar or solular system, which is what the immediate reaches of the human psyche really is. In this paradigm, the sun acts as an administrator, orchestrator, controller, or decipherer, but Mercury instructs the type of administration that needs to be created, the type of orchestration, and the type of meaning that needs to be made. Together, the Sun and Mercury create the center around which our human psyche builds meaning about itself and the world around it. When Leo loses its soul, it loses access to this meaning making process within its psyche and can no longer sense its direction in life. It is no wonder most Leos describe a sense of manifest destiny which they always feel, that is, until things start to go wrong. Now, this is the end of the article, so I'm just going to close up with a few commentary regarding this last part. Uh, this relationship between the Sun and Mercury. Mercury is never far from the Sun, and so the two work. You have to interpret the position of Mercury and the Sun together, because what Mercury is the emissary of the Sun. So what the Sun connotes in a chart, the promise or the potential that the natal Sun position holds, will be delivered in the position of Mercury and its aspects, or position of Mercury and its aspects tell you how this potential of the Sun is going to be delivered. Because Mercury is the intellect, is how we communicate with the world. It is also since it also rules Virgo, it also describes how the ego will be tempered in the sixth house or in Virgo, in order to be able to go into the social negotiation that must take place in Libra to establish a relationship. Now, as can be seen, what I describe here is Leo is an extremely simple sign. it is different from the signs before, the four signs before it, that is Aries to Cancer, in that it is no longer instinctual. It is the point which the psyche develops to the point where it recognizes itself as a creator, as an ego, as a self. Now it's not like it wants to create. No. Creation is an act of self-significance. It creates because it needs to feel its own self. And you can recognize this in a child. When a child has reached a certain age, say past the age of 7, they begin to recognize themselves as an independent entity in their own right, wherein which they can decide for themselves and say, I will, which is simply an extension of the I am that they felt at the initial stages when they recognized their own self-existence. This is really very important. This is an important point, because the need to create is simply a way of the self asserting itself as an individual in its own right. This is super important. You see, because what Leo is trying to do is to catch a glimpse of itself in its own creation. It wants to know what its ego is, what it is. Who is it that is doing the creating? Who is it that is doing the willing? Now, in this calculus, Leo does not recognize the existence of any other creator. Because the moment Leo recognizes the existence that other people also can create, then this impetus within itself is weakened. It begins to experience what is called a disempowerment that is akin to shame. Because there's nothing special about it, because what it can do, everybody else can do. Now, the transformation that must happen to Leo to make it able to recognize and accommodate or integrate into or with other co-creators, that transformation must take place in Virgo, in the 6th house. So your 6th house shows how this transformation takes place, or the energies involved in this transformation. And Virgo shows you which house the transformation actually takes place. You see? But Leonine energy must be tempered. Now, the process of tempering is not a process of disempowerment. It's a process of re-realization, coming to terms with something that you cannot control. And so the signs of Leo and Virgo work together. For me, I personally interpret them together. You see? Because these are the two psychic energies that must work together to start what is the most important phase in the development of the human psyche, which begins to take place in the 7th house, because it is a house where you become not just aware of the other, because that takes place in Virgo, where you actually meet the other, and this is where all human problems come from: the integration with the other, the definition of the other. Now, if the ego is so impaired that it views the other as an external thing that it can control or manipulate and all, that's where all the problems start. That's where all human problems stem from. You see, because the other is an extension of the self. But if this is not properly understood due to impairment of the development of that ego, then it sees the other not as an extension of self or as an integral part of self, but as an alien to self that must be kept separate. You understand? Which needs a control matrix to be able to, then all sorts of problems originate. Then the ego is not able to transition into the intimacy of the 8th house, the alchemical processes that are supposed to happen there, and then the release that takes place in the 9th house, and the success that is postulated in the 10th. That's really what it is. So usually these psychological problems, they start at a very early age. That is why most astrologers will often focus on the developmental processes that were taking place during childhood. That's really what it is. So that is this my summary of Leo rising. Leos are charming people. The world is the stage for a Leo, and when you have Leo on the angles, or you have Leo and the luminaries on the angles, then the world becomes a stage and you must act. But you must recognize your own self-significance. That is the key to everything. And when you have recognized your own self-significance, then there is no need. Like I always say, power doesn't corrupt absolutely. Power corrupts the powerless absolutely. If you are born with Leo as a significant part of your natal chart, then you realize that you are one who is destined for what? For significance. Now, the stressful aspects mean that your sense of significance is something you don't understand, and so must be resolved in the actual world, meaning you must fight for it. And the fighting process is simply the process of acceptance. And what it translates to is that you have self-significance, but you have refused to accept it, meaning you cannot carry it lightly. You cannot accept the fact that you have self-significance, so you must battle a so-called adversary in the external world outside of you, so that you can, by winning that battle, you can now accept your self-significance. Or you must conquer something outside of you, so that the basis of that conquering can now give you the wherewithal to accept your self-significance. But the truth is, that's all going on in your head. Your self-significance is there. You don't need to fight anyone or battle it. That's the essence of Leo. It is what it is.